Okay, everybody. Hey, it's Nels. Welcome to the live stream today. And I was wondering about all the different topics I could cover today, and I came up with one that I hope is kind of interesting. It's actually been one that I've been thinking about doing for a while, which is, as you know, I have a product management framework that I have created. It's covered in my book, The Secret Product Manager Handbook. By the way, I'm Nils Davis, and you can tell that I'm the author of that if you look right down there. There's my name, and I don't know where my finger points when I'm doing the live video, unfortunately. Anyway, it has my name and the name of the book right there. So anyway, Nils Davis, the author of the Secret Product Manager Handbook, and I use a particular framework that I have kind of created in the Secret Product Manager Handbook, and I thought it would be interesting, since there are several other product management frameworks out there in the world, to actually do a little comparison between the Secret Product Manager Framework. And I'll go over a little bit of details about what is in the Secret Product Manager Framework. And then we will compare it to some other frameworks you might be familiar with, like the Pragmatic Marketing Framework, the AI PMM Framework, and also Martin Ericsson's framework. So without giving too much away, those are the things that we're going to take a look at. Okay, so let me actually change screens here. So the way that I start this out is I talk about, obviously we're called product managers. We like to think about our products. We like to work with our products, all that kind of stuff. And the fact is that there's other things that we do. So products are obviously a big part of what we spend our time on. And this is the domain of things like, our requirements that we write and our backlog, and things like Agile, and are we product owners versus product managers, things like that. And also releases and roadmaps come under this idea of product. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about another way to think about this particular box of product, and it's something I've started to use a lot more myself, because I think it helps describe better what we do. But the point of this product is that what products really do is they solve problems. And so there's another whole aspect of what we do, and you probably heard a lot about this, things like customer discovery, continuous discovery, nothing interesting happens in the office, or Nihito. These are all referring to the fact that a big part of what we need to do is go out and find the problems that we're going to solve with our products. Now, there's a lot of different ways to find problems, right? And they might be business problems, they might be consumer problems, they might also be kind of unmet opportunities, meaning there's something out there, we feel that there's some opportunity for people to achieve something, and they can't do it because there's not a solution or a tool for helping them do that. If you think about, as I was talking about, and I'm looking directly at my camera here, my webcam, I was thinking about the GoPro camera, for example. The GoPro camera doesn't exactly solve a problem per se. What it does is it actually opens up a bunch of opportunities that were never really met before, or there wasn't a really good solution for, which was a camera to take videos of people doing active things. People always want to do active things, but in order to be videoed, they needed a videographer to work with them. If you can think about skydiving videos, people needed somebody to skydive with them to take the video of them skydiving. And now, you can get a GoPro. I don't know if it actually works for skydiving, but the point is that there was an unmet opportunity out there, and GoPro with their camera kind of solved that. And of course, now there's lots of other products in that space. But the point is that we have to, as product managers, go out there and find these problems. And we do that using things like market research. And we have to validate the things that we find, that we find a problem that we have to validate whether anybody is willing to pay for a solution to that problem, and whether there's enough people who are willing to pay for the solution, and if we're really the right people to do it. So that's another thing I've talked about in some of these videos, and things like, is it a real problem? Is it worth solving? And are we the right people to solve it? It's RWW is a nice acronym for that. And are we able to solve it? So there's a feasibility aspect as well. There's a lot more going on with this whole find a market problem piece. But if you think about what our product really is, our product is really a solution to a market problem that we or someone has discovered. So let's actually change the name of that box to solution. And so I like to think about what we do is we find problems and we create solutions to those problems. But that's actually not the final story. We also have to figure out how to get those solutions to the customers who need the solutions. And so we went to the market, we found that there were some problems, we ascertained that there were enough people that had that problem and would pay for a solution that was worth building. But now that we've built the solution, in fact, we can even do this before we build the solution, we have to go find those people, all the rest of the people in the market that have that problem, and we have to figure out how to sell it to them. And so that's really the whole framework right there. We need to find a market problem. We need to create a solution to that problem. And we use typically working with our development team to do that, to create the solution to the problem. And then we have to take the solution to market. And typically, again, we're working with other people to take the solution to market. We're working with sales, we're working with marketing, we're working with partners, and so on. So each of these steps is really about how we work with some other folks either in the organization or out in the market or something like that. So that's the basic framework. Now, I have another little add-on to this framework. I'll come to that in a minute. So the reason this is sort of, I think, valuable is if you go back to what Peter Drucker said, a great quote, the purpose of a company is to create a customer. This is a framework that, as I've presented it, is very simple. It's got 3 basic boxes: find a market problem, create a solution, take it to market. But it's all focused on the customer or the prospect before they become a customer and about what they need. It's not about the things that necessarily, it doesn't say what we do. It puts out a context around what we do. And then you can kind of figure out, what do you need to do in order to fulfill this model, right? What are the activities that you need to do? And we're going to talk about some frameworks that are really much more focused on the what, as opposed to this, which I think is really focused on the why. So in order to create a customer, we have to find some problems that the world has, that the market has. We have to find them, or they help them find us, right? That's what marketing is. It's about helping them find us. And then we have to make sure that what we can offer them is better than their other alternatives, and then they will become a customer. And that's essentially how that works. So let me talk a little bit more. So I usually mostly talk about those 3 boxes, these 3 boxes that are showing right now: find a market problem, create a solution, take it to market. But there's some other components. Obviously, to be a good product manager, there's actually some skills that you need to have. And there are skills like about communicating. There's some skills around analytics. There's skills about writing. There's skills about interacting with people, all kinds of different skills. And so that's a sort of a foundation of being able to do this. Another really important thing is that you need to have some kind of tooling to help you keep all this stuff organized. And unfortunately, I think this is an area where we are not very well supported as product managers. There's not actually that many tools out there that we can use that are super effective for this whole process. There's lots of tools around the solution creation piece, things like Jira, which a lot of us use for tracking our user stories and things. It's not ideal for that, and I've used better tools for that, but that's what I get to use, for example, at my current work. There's not very many tools out there for helping you find market problems. There's a few more around some of the aspects of going to market, although they're not product management focused. They're really more marketing focused. And we all have sort of different things that we do in that process. Of course, there's the management of the product management organization itself, which is about helping us product managers become better at what we do, at making sure that we have a voice at the top level tables, whatever the different things. So management is always a component of any of these big processes. And then I always like to talk about strategy as well as being a component of the secret product management framework, because a lot of what we need to do, or everything we should do, if there's a well-defined strategy, we want to do everything in the context of that strategy. So if there's a well-defined strategy, we're going to go talk to customers who are aligned with the strategy, in the sense of they're in the market that our strategy has decided we should go after. And the type of problem that they have is the type that we have decided we want to focus on in our strategy. Now, this can go both ways. You can start from a a specific problem and then build a strategy around that. But even so, once you built that strategy, you want the problem and the segment and all that stuff to be aligned, and you want to keep going with that. So anyway, that is the basic model for the Secret Product Manager Handbook and the Secret Product Manager Framework, and I wanted to go over that because I haven't done it recently on the video series. So there's an easy way to say it out loud, and I've said it a few times. We find market problems. We find market problems. We guide the creation of solutions to those problems, and then we take the solutions to market. To me, that is the essence of what we do in product management. And of course, there's lots of more details that this particular model doesn't drill down on. But on the other hand, if you were thrown into this job with this description, you might actually be able to figure out a lot of what you needed to do, right? You need to understand you need to go out and find those market problems. Well, what do? You go talk to people and you find out what is causing them pain. You need to create a solution that is in some way differentiated from other potential solutions that the market might have. And so you need to know something about competitors. You need to know something about the scope of what the solution needs to look like in order to be successful. And then to go to market, you say things like, well, I learned from my market research that when people have this kind of problem, they need a solution, they don't have a good one. So let me go find those people. That's the marketing programs that bring in leads. And then when you talk to them, you say, hey, do you have this kind of problem? And if they say yes, you say, well, I've got a great solution. Obviously, that's an oversimplification of how you'd actually pitch. But, if you found people that don't have the problem, you can give that pitch to them all day, or any kind of pitch, and they won't buy because they don't care about it. They don't have the problem. But if you found people that do have the problem and they haven't been able to find a solution, and your solution is superior, your pitch can be pretty basic, as long as the pitch shows them that that's actually the case. So that's the real model. And of course, the ultimate goal here is not to have done this. The ultimate goal is to, as Peter Drucker said, is to have created a customer or a lot of customers and to be selling them something that is very valuable to them and that enables you to make a lot of revenue and make a lot of profit. And if you find a problem that's worth solving out there that people will give you money for, that is actually the way that companies become successful, is by doing that. And that doesn't matter if it's an enterprise software product or a product for companies or a product for consumers. That's what the ultimate goal or the ultimate way to win is, to create something that's better than alternatives and that people will pay for, and then find enough of those people that you can make enough money for the company to survive. So that's the basic model. I think it's pretty useful. It's a good way to think about things. It's much simpler than some of the models, and it's actually the same level of simplicity as other models, but it actually gives you, I think, much more of a sense of what actions to take, right? If you are out there trying to sell something and you can't articulate the market problem that it solves, well, you're very likely to fail. If you're building a solution, but you haven't figured out what problem that the market is concerned about, let me start that again. If you're building a solution, but you can't articulate what problem it is that the market has that your solution solves, it's unlikely that you can be successful. If you're building a solution that a very small number of people have, you might be able to articulate it to those people, but if there's not enough of them to make a viable business, then your go-to-market is likely to fail. If you have a solution to a great market problem, but you aren't able to articulate that solution in a marketing way, even if there's lots of people that have the problem, again, that's another way to fail. So these are really the key things you need to make sure you do. You always have to have a fundamental problem that you're solving. You have to create a solution that's differentiated in some way. And you have to be able to find the people that have that problem and then have a conversation with them about how your solution is superior. And if you can do those things, again, you're much more likely to be successful as a company. So that is the framework. I think it's pretty powerful. I'd love to have your feedback on it, but I'm now going to talk about another topic related to this framework, which is, why is this framework so good? Well, I think it's good because, of course, I created it. So I think it solves a lot of problems about product management, or explains a lot of things about product management that I always struggled with. Why are we doing it? What are the real important things that we do? And over time, particularly as I reflected a lot and did a lot of writing about product management and talked to a lot of product managers and took some courses and this and that, this is what sort of I really simplified out of all the things we do. I'm a really big fan of getting to first principles, of understanding sort of what's the underlying reason that we do things. And so there's some frameworks that are much more complicated, but it's really hard to detect why there's all these things in this framework. Now, if you take this framework and combine it with some others, it's actually really powerful. So let me actually just go ahead and talk about that. So I've got the rest of it there. Let's take a look at some other frameworks. So one of them is the Pragmatic Marketing Framework. One of them is the AI PMM Product Management Lifecycle Framework. And then there's Martin Ericsson did this nice little Venn diagram that talks about product management as being the intersection between user experience, technology, and business. And so let's drill down a little bit into these and talk about what the salient points of these are and the strengths and potentially some of the weaknesses. So if we look at the Pragmatic Marketing Framework, the way that I think about the Pragmatic Marketing Framework, it really is a list of, I think there's 37 boxes, 31 boxes, something like that. And it really is a list of the things that we do as product managers. But it doesn't really say much about when you do them or why. What's the order? And in fact, there is no ordering. And one of the reasons I circled competitive landscape in this picture is that if you go back to my model, find a market problem, create a solution, take it to market, competitive landscape plays a role in each of those components of what you're doing, right? You're doing competitive thinking and competitive analysis and understanding competitors and articulating the difference between you and competitors throughout the whole process. When you go out to find a market problem, one of the characteristics of a good market problem is that it's not solved well by the competitors, by the other options that the customer has. And that means there's an opening, there's a competitive opening. And you probably need to know that before you decide whether or not you should build that solution. Of course, when you're building the solution, either when you're building new versions or even when you're building the first version, you want to keep in mind what do the competitors do and how can we differentiate from that? And what are the things that the competitors do that contribute to a bad solution so that we can address those? What are the things that the competitors do that contribute to a good solution so we can emulate those? So we have to have competitive knowledge all through the process of designing and defining and creating that solution. And then, of course, when we go to market, a big part of what we have to do when we go to market is articulate why our solution is superior for the prospects that we want than the competitive offerings are. So competition goes throughout the whole life cycle, really every step of things that we do as product managers. Now you can look at that for any of these boxes or most of these boxes in the pragmatic marketing model, that those are things that we have to constantly be thinking about every day, more or less. Now, some of these things we do, some of them you do literally every day, and some of them you do not every day, but on a regular basis. And some of them you may not even do much. If you're a small company with one product, for example, you're unlikely to do much around product portfolio until you grow big enough that it's actually worthwhile having multiple products. So product portfolio. And then doing win-loss analysis. Well, sometimes in some companies, that's a product management function. In some companies, it doesn't get done. And it's not required to do it, although you always learn something useful if you do it. But competitive landscape, actually, you do have to always be thinking about. And that's true for a lot of the different boxes. Some of them are things you do all the time. Some of them are things you do occasionally. Some of them you might not even do depending on the particular situation of your company. So let's compare now to the product management lifecycle, which is from AIPMM. And this is an interesting one. This one, to me, is really about sort of a timeline. It orders all the boxes. So the pragmatic marketing framework, it was a bunch of boxes that were unordered with not really too much direction about when things should happen. And as I said, a lot of these things happen over and over again throughout the life cycle of your product. This framework is much more about the timeline and the ordering. But to me, the thing I notice really quickly when I start to look at this is that it doesn't talk about the customer or the market problem, and it really doesn't talk much about go-to-market. This is really primarily about that that bit of creating the solution and then maintaining the solution over its life, as opposed to why are we creating the solution in the first place and how are we getting that solution out to the market and selling it. So that's sort of my takeaway on this. I think this is really valuable for lots of different, for the solution building part of building a product, but there's other things I think that happen in the product management lifecycle that it does give a little bit of short shrift to. Now let's also finally take a look at the Martin Ericsson framework, this Venn diagram, which is very beautiful. I like it a lot because it also has three things like my model does. It's really maybe more, you can think of it as being about communication, and it's about how we have to interact with all the different stakeholders within the company. And of course, there's also, I guess, you can sort of think of business as being, it contains maybe not just your colleagues in your business literally, but also the people that you sell to. So Martin is European, and in Europe they have this concept of the commercial side of the business, and that is the sales, as well as they kind of think of it as having the customer component in there as well. And so I think that may be why business is a box. So user experience, that's of course a lot about creating and designing the solution. And I tend to think a little bit more that product managers, this may be my own bias because I'm actually not that good a designer and I don't have those very good skills as a designer. So I always really like to work with designers who are good at user experience and user interaction design and things like that. So I don't really necessarily think of that as part of product management per se. I think of it as part of design. Now, if you're a good designer and a product manager, then sure, you can do that. But for me, that just doesn't work. It would be my products wouldn't come out looking very good because I'm not that good a designer. I am more stronger on the tech side. But I think the strength of this picture really is the fact that it talks about these communication channels, that we are in the center of a bunch of different types of communication. And also there's this implication perhaps that we have to do what you might call code switching between these different domains of people. There's technical people and business people, and they don't really speak the same language, but as the locus of communication between those two groups, we have to do a lot of that sort of translation or impedance matching is something I've often called it. That's kind of a technical term. I think it's a very accurate term to what we do as product managers in terms of this communication. But a simpler way to say is that you have to be able to explain business concepts to technical people in a way that they understand and get behind. And you have to be able to explain technical concepts to business people in a way that they understand and can get behind. And that often means that when you're explaining a technical concept to a business person, you're not using technical language. You're using metaphors. You're talking about their own experience and how you might be able to make their experience better. Whereas if you're talking about a business issue to a technical person, you may not be using business terms. You may translate that into technical terms to make it, and maybe technical analogies and metaphors that are based on technology and things like that. So I think it's a really good thing to take away from this chart. The big challenge, I think, with this chart is it doesn't tell you what to do. And so that's one of the things that I wanted to make sure was in my chart. So my chart, again, my model, very simple, is that it's about why, but it also gives you some context of what you should be doing in the process. And you can use it even in the state that it's in. You can use it as a litmus test. So if you're building a solution, you can always ask yourself, do I have a good market problem that I found that is worth solving? And if you are going to market, you can say, well, is my solution good? And do I understand the market problem so I can go out and find the people that have that problem so that I can sell them my solution? And so I think each of the boxes that I have implies a set of actions. Now, it doesn't explicitly give you the set of actions. Now, if you get my book, which is structured around this framework, I do give you a lot of actions. And I actually think that's one of the ways that there's synergy between these models. The Pragmatic Marketing Framework has a bunch of actions, and the training trains you how to do a lot of those actions. My framework kind of tells you why you might do them and in some sense when. Even though the AI PMM model is about when, it's about when within that solution context, but it doesn't really talk too much about the items at the either end, which is like finding the problem and taking it to market. But my book talks more about that, and of course those are also part of the pragmatic marketing framework. Now, Martin Ericsson's diagram, you can think of it as more about where and how we interact, and so that's a useful component of itself. But my framework is really about why. Why are we doing this? Why do we do it? Why do we do the work we do? Well, we do it to solve problems and to get those solutions into the market so that they can provide value to our customers. So that's essentially the model. That's the comparison between these different frameworks. So, summary. Well, I just summarized it, so I won't summarize it again. If you want to learn more about the Secret Product Management Framework, you can check out my book, which is called The Secret Product Manager Handbook, and you can get it on Amazon in Kindle format or paperback. I'll put some links in the show notes. And then you can also, if you are interested in conversing with me about this, you can leave comments on this video. You can follow me on Twitter, and my DMs are open. And I'm also on LinkedIn. I have a blog, secretpmhandbook.com/blog. And I have a podcast, which is at alltheresponsibility.com. It's called All the Responsibility, None of the Authority, because that's exactly what we product managers have and don't have and don't have, I guess. We have all the responsibility. We don't have any authority. We have to lead fully by influence. So I talk about those kinds of issues every week on the podcast. Check that out if you have a chance. And then I have, of course, this YouTube channel. And if you're watching this video, chances are you know that because it's on the YouTube channel. So thank you for watching and listening. If you did, I hope you did. And if you like the video, please consider clicking that like button. If you'd like to hear more of this kind of stuff, click the subscribe button and you'll see the new videos when they come up every week. Oh, just wanted to mention, I do these every Monday night, 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. So that doesn't work for folks in Europe, but you can watch the replay. But for folks in the States, I think it's a good time. Come and join me live if you'd like to. I'm putting additional resources related to this topic into the show notes, so you can check those out, and there's a bunch of links to other things that I have that might be of interest as well. I love to get your comments, and if you have a chance to comment, I would love to read those, and I respond to them. And I think that's it for the video tonight. Hope this was useful and interesting. Let me know in the comments. Let me know whatever. Share it with your friends if you think this is interesting. I personally, since I developed this framework myself, I continue to come back with, I want to be self-critical, and do I really still believe it? And in fact, for me, it's held up pretty well over the past few years since I first started putting it out there. So hopefully that'll be true for you. Hopefully you'll find it useful. Hopefully you'll find it a good guide for the actions that you should be taking as a product manager. And if you're not a product manager, if you're an engineer, or if you are a product marketer, maybe it will help give you some sense of the types of things you can talk to a product manager about, and the types of things that the product manager is thinking about when he interacts with you, or he or she interacts with you and asks you to do things or suggests doing things or works with you on go-to-market, whatever it might be. Anyway, hope this was useful. Until next time, this is Nils Davis signing out. Bye-bye.